Good afternoon. Today is budget day. That's no surprise to anyone. C'est le dé budgétaire. Je fais aujourd'hui l'étude budget 2023. It is a budget that fails people and the planet. It is very focused, but it's focused on things that don't deliver. One would have thought, with the focus across this country of Canadians looking at affordability, looking at challenges, we were hoping to see, as Greens, and I think other parties too, an amnesty on CERB repayments, hitting the lowest income people as CRA goes after people who can't afford to pay back. We were hoping to see the long-promised disability benefits with details about when disability benefit payments would start heading out to Canadians who need them, not in the budget. We were hoping to see new investments in housing. There is no new money, I repeat that, no new money in housing except for very welcome investments in Indigenous housing, northern, rural, urban, and on reserve. Housing for Indigenous peoples, no other new money on housing, but some rearranged previous money. There is nothing there to help low-income Canadians except a one-time only grocery rebate. 1 week out of the next year, Canadians who desperately need help paying for groceries will see up to, for one family, $437 once in GST repayments. When we were looking to see help for people, what we see is, yes, as promised, dentist visits will be covered. That amount goes up. But there's nothing for pharmacare. We desperately need pharmacare in this country. We're the only country with a universal health care system without pharmacare. Looking at climate, all the investments are described as clean energy, clean economy. There are new investments in tax credits towards geothermal, that's excellent, towards solar, excellent, but towards things that aren't clean, not green, and don't help reduce climate emissions, such as small modular reactors, lots of money for SNC-Lavalin and its friends in SMRs, and new money for fake climate solutions called biofuel, like cutting down our forests to create wood pellets. We're disappointed in the measures that are there and very sad by the measures and the opportunities that were missed, like an excess profit tax, such as what the U.S. was bringing in on the $65 billion profits of the oil and gas sector in Canada alone. There's no excess profit tax there, nor on the big banks, nor on grocery chains. There is money in new taxes and share dividend charges and so on. About $8.5 billion is in new tax measures on the wealthiest. That's welcome, but we were really disappointed at the lack of imagination, lack of courage in a wide range of measures. The Canada Water Agency, for example, was a Liberal promise 2 elections ago for $1 billion. It comes in at about $120 million over the next 8 years. Anyway, without diving deep in the details, je veux dire seulement que nous sommes déçus avec la possibilité des mesures pour aider les familles partout au Canada, particulièrement les familles qui vivent en pauvreté. Nous sommes désolés parce qu'il n'y a pas les fonds aider les peuples qui vivent avec les disabilities. Nous avons les promesses de plusieurs plateformes libérales, mais pas maintenant dans ce budget les fonds qui étaient promis. I'm open to discussing with any questions you may have, mais je veux ajouter qu'il y a aussi nouvelles subventions pour l'énergie fossile. We were shocked to see new subsidies to offshore drilling in our Arctic for oil and gas. We've been promised by this government time and time again, including just moments ago in question period, that oil and gas subsidies would come to an end. Instead, we see new ones. Merci. Thank you.
Vous auriez aimé voir dans ce budget?
J'ai hâte pour le moment de voir l'élimination de subventions fossiles pour annuler l'oléoduc Trans Mountain, pour les choses, pour mettre sur pied un vrai programme pour atteindre notre but pour réduire les gaz à effet de serre, mais dans ce budget, il y a les promesses seulement pour l'énergie et pour l'amélioration, pour la décarbonisation de notre électricité, mais nous manquons actuellement les mesures pour le faire.
In terms of the excess profit tax, grocery companies are saying that they're dealing with inflation as well, and so they're just passing this on to the consumers. How would you define excess profits, and why is that something that is such a priority to implement here in Canada as has been done in Europe?
Well, we particularly look at the oil and gas sector. The grocery store chains have made the case. I don't think their case would stand up with further scrutiny. I'd like to see further studies before a committee about the idea that they have no choice but to have the charges they've had and that this is their actual margin for markup. I don't accept that as accurate, but that needs more study. In the case of the fossil fuel sector, there's no question. $65 billion in profits this year alone from the 10 biggest oil and gas companies in Canada, owned mostly by foreign interests. Their profits have been driven not by shrewd business decisions, but because of war. They are essentially war profiteering by Putin's attack on Ukraine. They're making excess profits, and Canadians ought to have an expectation that our government will set a tax rate that recovers those profits to help Canadians who are suffering from the inflation that was caused by the same war that generated the profits for big oil.
Do you think that could be politically problematic, particularly in the West, for the government?
I think everybody across Canada understands that when any company is making money off the suffering of others, whether in Ukraine or across Canada from higher prices, it's appropriate that the wealthiest corporations owned and held offshore with the dividends that for their investors in another country, we should be getting that money back so that we can take care of those who are most vulnerable and most at risk as we have inflationary trends.
Promises to have a real, green energy and clean energy focus to this budget, and you're saying that failed. So tell us why.
The clean energy focus, it depends. If you're prepared to call things that are actually not clean, call them clean. We had a commitment from this government that they would be supporting only green hydrogen. They've thrown in fossil hydrogen with tax benefits. So we worked out the subsidies come to about another $3 billion in subsidies to fossil fuels because they're saying, well, look, if you're deriving your hydrogen from fossil fuels, but you quote unquote abate them, so let's add another scam on top of the scam. Let's say carbon capture and storage, which doesn't work when applied to a fossil fuel investment, then it becomes a green or a clean investment. So there's a lot of green washing and not a lot of green delivery.
When it comes to the global push towards a clean economy, we've seen massive investments in the United States on this. How does Canada compare in your eyes, and what might it mean moving forward for investments in clean tech in Canada?
We're failing to grasp the opportunity we have in front of us to work with the United States for a 100% decarbonized electricity grid. We've put I'm really pleased to see a discussion of our grid on the table, but it won't deliver it because we have individual monopolistic utilities in every province. We have to get them to agree to work together. And when we asked questions about this to Finance Canada, that conversation has not started yet. We absolutely need an electricity grid that connects east-west and north-south that's 100% decarbonized. And that is now in a conversation, but not delivered in this budget. So when you throw in nuclear small modular reactors, so-called, that are unproven, never have been built anywhere in the world, and again, I mentioned SNC-Lavalin in passing in my opening remarks. Every Canadian ought to know why it is that the track is greased to support small modular reactors, because we know that SNC-Lavalin knows how to grease every track they come into, and SNC-Lavalin is the big private sector pusher of every small modular reactor project we're seeing. So they are not green, they're not clean, and when you take dollars away from renewables in order to put them in untested small modular reactors, you're actually damaging the track to 100% decarbonized electricity. You throw in what's a scam, Canadians can see it a mile away, cut down our forests, turn them into pellets, and call that climate action. I don't think Canadians are going to buy that approach to biofuels is clean or green electricity. And again, we're seeing that with adding fossil fuels to hydrogen, as well as referring to any development of clean electricity with a rebate if you're using fossil fuels, but you have in some way abated them.
What more would you have wanted to see on affordable housing?
Anything. There's nothing new in this budget for affordable housing. Let me turn to my colleague, Mike Morrice, to speak to this.
Advocates were calling for permanent, sustained funding. For example, with the Rapid Housing Initiative, there is no renewal of the Rapid Housing Initiative. There is a mention of the Home Buyers Bill of Rights. That was promised within 1 year after last year's budget. In this year's budget, there's no timeline whatsoever for it. And so while, to give credit, it's important, activists have been calling out for an Indigenous housing strategy for some time. That is an important new investment. Outside of that $4 billion, there are no new housing investments in this entire budget, and there are no new policies to shift the market. Homes should be places for people to live, not commodities for investors to trade. And the federal government could have taken action in this budget, for example, by removing the tax loophole for real estate and investment trusts and using those funds to invest in affordable housing. They chose not to do it, and it's a disappointment.
You said back a decade ago that the Green Party was fiscally conservative and you supported balanced budgets. Mm-hmm. The deficit is $40 billion. Do you think that is justified?
Balanced budgets obviously are something you have to work towards. We've never had anything like a global pandemic. I completely support the government spending that we needed at the time. I agree with the language in this budget that our COVID spending saved lives. Probably 70,000 Canadian lives were saved by quick action, which we took, by the way, unanimously in the House of Commons, every party. And that's clearly going to create deficit. The track that they've drawn in terms of projected trends towards bringing our budget back to balance is not unreasonable, and I don't think that when we look at the other authorities, Parliamentary Budget Office, large commercial banks, there's much panic about the fiscal guardrails and the direction we're on in terms of our fiscal position. But the deficit that you can never make up is missing the timelines and the one-time only opportunity we have to ensure that our children have a livable world.
So you think it would be fiscally responsible to spend more on social programs in this budget?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because we absolutely must ensure that the economy doesn't stall. We're looking at a shallow recession. Some of what we're looking at can be aided with continued government spending. We need a plan to get back in balance, but we don't want to stall a recovery by overreaction to what are inflationary trends that are not all about normal inflation. The budget fails to mention, for example, that one of the reasons that food prices are going up is the climate crisis. They refer to supply chain gaps. Those supply chain gaps in terms of food involve droughts and natural disasters and the inability to get food prices back down. So we need to be aware of the ways in which the climate crisis impacts our day-to-day lives, and we need to know that Canadians, having lived through pandemic, particularly low-income Canadians, need supports now, and we should mention of supports, a complete absence of support for mental health programs. We know we need them, it's desperate, and other than the 1-888 suicide line, which we should all make a note of it, but we don't see the supports we need for mental health, addiction counseling in this budget that we were hoping to see.
Can I offer an example?
Yes.
So in terms of government spending, the Canada Disability Benefit, a guaranteed income for people with disabilities, has been promised for many years, is again not in this budget. Giving a person with a disability money to pay rent and buy groceries is not inflationary spending, and the government can do it if they reallocated funds. For example, an excess profit tax on the grocery store giants.
Would you rather see the excess profit tax as opposed to the grocery rebate?
Well, absolutely. And first of all, you can do both. It doesn't need to be one or the other, and we shouldn't have to play that game. Rather, we should be focused. In fact, I asked the grocery store giants if they want to pay an excess profit tax. Of course, they said no. It needs to be on this government. We've already had the reports on it. To your earlier question, look at the average profits over the past 10 years. Profits that are above that amount are excess profits. Use those revenues to invest in the programs that, for example, the disability community has been calling out for years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Merci.
a letter grade, how would you grade it?
The grades are always a tough thing. I can say I'm really proud that we were able to force this government to expand dental care. That's going to save money for families. That's going to mean that they're going to be able to take care of their teeth. And it's the biggest expansion of our healthcare system in a generation. It's truly going to be life-changing, and it's something that we're really proud of. That's going to really help Canadians in a real concrete way. And we're also proud that we forced this government to save people money, put more money back in their pockets with the GST rebate, which has been rebranded the grocery rebate. That's going to put money back in people's pockets. It's something that's going to make a difference in people's lives. And we're proud that we're able to do that. We're proud that we're, for the first time ever, able to connect government investments to good wages. That's never been there before, having those strings attached that we're going to give supports and incentives to tackle the climate crisis only if there's guarantees for good wages, good pay, and support for union jobs. Like, that's something that's never been done before, and we're proud of that. We're also, on a number of areas, not satisfied that this government hasn't responded to the urgency of the housing crisis, that they haven't put in place changes to EI, given that we're up against a recession. So there's things that we're not satisfied by, but we're very proud of the work that we've been able to do.
So are you going to be supporting this budget is the big question.
Yes, we'll be supporting the budget. We're going to be supporting the expansion of dental care. We're going to be supporting giving people some money back in their pockets, helping them save money. We're going to be supporting the good wages tied to investments. We're going to be supporting the relief that Canadians deserve and that we force this government to deliver. En français. Oui, on va appuyer ce budget parce qu'on a élargir les soins dentaires pour inclure nos aînés et les enfants de moins de 18 ans et les gens qui vivent avec un handicap. On a maintenant on a forcé le gouvernement de continuer doubler le crédit de la TPS. Ça va mettre plus d'argent dans les poches des gens. Et on a, pour la première fois, lié les investissements dans les entreprises qui font face à la crise climatique avec des bons salaires. Donc, c'est la première fois qu'on a eu cette garantie que les investissements doivent être liés avec les bons salaires. Donc, on est fiers de ça. On va appuyer le budget.
C'est un bon budget, selon vous?
Donc, on félicite, on est fiers des victoires qu'on a obtenues. Donc, on est fiers du fait que les soins dentaires sont là. On est fiers du fait qu'on a forcé ce gouvernement de mettre le plus d'argent dans les poches des gens. On est fiers de tout ça. Mais en même temps, on n'est pas satisfait avec les manques des actions pour la crise du logement, les manques des actions pour améliorer l'assurance emploi. Donc, il y a des éléments où on n'est pas satisfait, mais on est fiers de ce qu'on a obtenu pour les gens.
Most of the initiatives, that were in the agreement with the Liberals have been covered with the last two budgets. Where does this put you going forward in terms of leverage and supporting the Liberal government when most of the priorities have been introduced?
We're proud that we've been able to force this government to deliver things. And let me be very clear. There would not have been dental care in this budget but for New Democrats. There would not have been an expansion or a continuing of doubling the GST tax credit, which is the grocery rebate, but for the fact that we forced this government to deliver that. There wouldn't have been connections. There wouldn't have been clear ties between good jobs and investments in companies that are fighting the climate crisis, but for New Democrats. So we forced the government to do this. There's a number of things that are still need to be done by the end of this year. We still need to see anti-SCAB legislation. We still need to see pharmacare legislation, and we're going to make sure this government delivers those things as well by the end of the year.
What about the lack of a mention of pharmacare in this budget? That's a big ask for your party. I know they have till the end of the year to produce legislation according to your deal, but they didn't even mention it in the budget.
Well, they do have until the end of the year. I want to be very clear. We expect that legislation to be tabled by the end of this year and passed by the end of this year. That's according to our agreement, and we're going to force the government to do that. They have until the end of the year, and we're going to make sure they do that. It's very important to us, and we're going to continue to put pressure on the government to deliver on that very fundamental commitment that we forced them to make in our agreement. But it's a fundamental commitment for Canadians who want to see pharmacare happen.
Can you renegotiate terms of the agreement with the Liberals since most of the stuff is completed? Can you, I guess moving forward, come up with new priorities to support them to 2025?
So we have a number of things that are still outstanding that have to be done by the end of this year. We're going to continue to put pressure on the government to deliver on those things, and those things remain to be seen. So we'll continue to fight hard to make sure those are delivered, like pharmacare, like the anti-SCAB legislation. And there's additional things that we fought for. One example of that is the GST rebate. That was not in the agreement. We pushed hard to have it delivered last year, and we pushed again to have it delivered again this year. So that's an example of something that we've been able to push for something outside of the agreement.
Any concerns about the deficit forecast in the budget?
We are concerned about making sure we spend in a prudent way. And there's certain things that we can't afford to continue doing. And we made it very clear we think it's irresponsible and something we can't continue to do to give billions of dollars to already profitable oil and gas companies. That's something we can't continue to do and we can't afford to do. We also can't continue to allow for tax loopholes that allow for billions of dollars of revenue to be lost so that we can't use that to invest properly in Canadians' programs that they need. So there's certain things that the government has to stop doing that are irresponsible and are wasteful that we will continue to push for this government to stop doing.
Does the budget do enough to fight climate change?
I'd say, sadly, not enough, but the steps that are in the budget now are things that we force this government to do. So the fact that for the first time, we've made this strong connection that if we want to fight the climate crisis, we have to do that by creating good jobs and making sure people get good wages. We've done that in this budget. We forced this government to deliver on making sure there's strings attached. And I've been saying that for a while. We can't just give money away to incentivize the right decisions. We have to make sure that money is tied to guarantees for good wages and good jobs, and we've done that. So that's a positive step. But there's still a lot more that needs to be done. This government's failed to meet any of their targets. They've got to take their targets seriously. We need to see real action to reduce emissions, and we'll continue to fight for that.
Will you trigger an election if the Liberals don't meet the farmer care plan by the end of the year?
That's not a decision we're making today, but we want to make it very clear that there are certain things that the government has to deliver by the end of this year. And the Pharmacare is one of those. We want to make sure that's absolutely delivered by the end of this year. In this budget, we have forced the government to deliver meaningful things that are going to make people's lives better, save people money, and help them with their health care needs, like their dental care needs. That's something that we're proud of, and we force the government to do that. There's more things that we're going to continue to force this government to do by the end of this year.
Is this the last Liberal budget you'll support?
That is not, again, a decision we're making today. We're going to continue to fight for people. And our goal, like I've said always, is to force this government to work for people. People sent us here in a minority government. We respect that. We've been using our power to deliver for people, to save people money, to give people a break. Unlike the other opposition leaders and other opposition parties that have done nothing concretely to help people in this unprecedented, challenging time, we have used our power as the fourth party to meaningfully make a difference in people's lives. We campaigned on dental care, we delivered. We campaigned on making sure people got respect, and we delivered. We're going to continue to do that.
One issue you were pushing for was a national school lunch program to try and help with families struggling right now. It's not in the budget. I know provinces like BC are looking at a similar program, but what's your reaction to that, A? And then B, how realistic is that when education is a provincial priority?
I think it's a missed opportunity that the federal Liberal government did not move forward with a school lunch program. It's something that we can do. We can partner with provinces, have the funding to make a commitment to work with provinces to deliver this. And again, while certain areas are clearly provincial jurisdiction, that doesn't preclude the federal government from working together with provinces to deliver on things like childcare. That's something that is not necessarily a federal competence, but we actually used our power to force legislation to make that child care agreement that the federal government was able to do permanent. We believe that's something that the federal government can do. We can work with provinces to deliver meaningful help to people, and that just because something is strictly a jurisdiction of the province doesn't mean we can't find a way to work with provinces to deliver that. And the school lunch program is an example of something that we can do if we work with the federal, with the provincial parties or provincial sections to work to make sure that's delivered. It can be done, it should be done, and we continue to believe that that's something that the government should have done in this budget, but it didn't.
A huge chunk of the new spending is for, obviously, dental care. Are you concerned at all that Canadians are going to be upset with the NDP over, this major spending that you did kind of hold over the Liberals to push through?
I think Canadians are going to see savings that they're going to realize. I think they're going to be happy to see that on average families are going to save at least $1,200 per year. That's meaningful. We're going to save families another $500 up to $500 by putting more money back in their pockets with the GST doubling of the rebate. So these are concrete measures to save money for people. I think Canadians are going to be happy with that, and they're going to be happy knowing that they're going to be able to get their teeth fixed. That's something that Canadians are going to be happy with.
Last question.
Do you think that we'll ever see an excess profit tax under this government?
I'm concerned that so far the government has not really signaled an openness to doing that. And it's concerning because other countries around the world have acknowledged that that is a concrete way to tackle the greedy CEOs that are using inflation as cover to increase their profits. Other countries in Europe have put in place excess profit tax. We think that should happen here in Canada as well. It could happen with grocery store, massive corporate chains that are making record profits while charging record prices for Canadians. And so we still believe that that is the right thing to do. Excess profit tax can be put in place, and we'll continue to fight for that. Thanks so much.
Ask you on affordable housing, what would you like to see on affordable housing?
Thank you.
Okay.
After seeing $14 billion in cuts to the public service with no explanation of how they're going to achieve those cuts, it is very, very concerning to the Public Service Alliance of Canada. We are happy to see a couple of things in this budget, such as the reduction of the contracting out, which is good because it demonstrates every time they contract out public services, it costs taxpayers more, and there's no accountability for the services. As well, the 3% cuts, as I just talked about, across the board for all departments, agencies, and Crown corporations. That, coupled with a couple of other cuts that have been identified in this, $14 billion with no way of explaining how those costs or those cuts are going to be achieved. As I said, it's very concerning. For a government that says they believe in unions, they believe in workers, and they come out and they're basically going to cut the federal public service by $14 billion, as I said, it is very concerning. They're saying that Canadians are not going to see any change in services in this. They can't explain that. There is no way you can cut the federal public service by $14 billion and say it's not going to impact services. It most definitely will impact services. So that's the PSAC's reaction to the budget.
They're also saying there won't be layoffs. Do you believe that?
No, that's what I'm saying. They can't achieve these cuts and say at the same time there will be no job loss. There will be job loss, and there will be a noticeable service as well to Canadians with those cuts. Thank you.
Bien le bonjour. Vous êtes disproportionnément nombreux pour le poids de ce budget, parce qu'en effet, c'est un budget qui est assez mince. On parle depuis longtemps d'inflation. On craint depuis un bon moment une récession qui pourrait frapper l'économie canadienne et l'économie québécoise. Et on arrive avec un budget qui est à très peu de choses près, un copier-coller de l'énoncé économique de l'automne dernier. On va disposer tout de suite de certains éléments fondamentaux. Nous avions déjà établi que nous n'acceptions pas l'entente entre Ottawa et les provinces et le Québec, que les provinces et le Québec ont été obligés d'accepter, sinon c'était rien pantoute et qu'elles n'en avaient pas les moyens. Pour nous, les transferts en santé tels qu'ils ont été négociés sont inadéquats et à défaut de rencontrer la demande des provinces et du Québec à hauteur de 35 %, nous ne sommes pas satisfaits. Il n'y a absolument rien dans ce budget pour les aînés de 65 à 75 ans pour aller rejoindre leurs collègues de 75 ans et plus, ni même une augmentation digne de ce nom, incluant pour les gens âgés de 75 ans et plus. Il n'y a aucune réforme de l'assurance-emploi, aucune bonification pour les gens qui cotisent et qui n'ont accès à rien, c'est-à-dire 60 % des cotisants du régime d'assurance-emploi. Il n'y a rien du tout. Il y a par contre une illustration extraordinaire du déséquilibre fiscal. L'année dernière, le gouvernement a accumulé en crédits périmés, en sommes qui avaient été budgétées et qui n'ont pas été dépensées, environ 40 milliards de dollars. Or, il dit cette année qu'il fait un déficit de 40 milliards de dollars. Comprenons-nous bien, une chose annule l'autre. Et dans les faits, le gouvernement fédéral veut annoncer des déficits. Deuxième élément fondamental, il utilise le déséquilibre fiscal, donc les sommes, la marge que ça dégage, pour faire des investissements à caractère énergétique, lesquels peuvent s'avérer des cachettes pour de l'éco-blanchiment. Le mot éco-blanchiment est d'autant plus pertinent que ça passe par des crédits d'impôt dont on ne saura pas qui a bénéficié. Il y a donc des sommes qui iront en séquestration de carbone, cette lubie qui ne fonctionne toujours pas, en hydrogène gris fait à partir des hydrocarbures de l'Ouest canadien et caché dans les investissements pour les énergies dites propres, un financement vraisemblable pour le nucléaire qui, dans le contexte canadien, n'est pas une énergie propre. Il y a donc une part significative d'une somme de 21 milliards de dollars qui ira en soutien indirect par crédit d'impôt aux entreprises pétrolières. Grâce à ce fameux déséquilibre fiscal qu'on peut expliquer simplement en ceci que le gouvernement perçoit trop d'argent en taxes et en impôts par rapport à ce que sont ses obligations gouvernementales, alors que les provinces ne perçoivent pas assez d'argent en taxes et en impôts par rapport à ce que sont leurs obligations. Le gouvernement annonce ainsi que dans de 30 à 40 ans, il aura éliminé la dette fédérale au complet, alors que selon le directeur parlementaire du budget lui-même, dans de 30 à 40 ans, il y aura des provinces canadiennes en faillite et les finances de l'ensemble des provinces canadiennes se seront détériorées à un niveau irrécupérable. C'est grâce à ce procédé que le gouvernement fédéral centralise et littéralement achète des pouvoirs qui sont aux provinces. Dernière observation, c'est un budget qui n'est pas à caractère électoral, mais c'est un budget qui met dangereusement la table pour que celui de 2024 soit résolument à caractère électoral.
J'ai demandé au premier ministre quelle note il donnait à ce budget-là. Il m'a dit A+. Vous donnez quelle note à ce budget-là et pourquoi?
Je ne peux pas commenter la pertinence précise de l'exercice de mettre une note, mais est-ce que c'est une note de passage? Non, évidemment. Fait que j'y mettrai un E parce qu'il ne réussit pas. C'est un budget qui ne tient pas compte de la réalité économique et qui se dit ça va se replacer tout seul, l'inflation. Fait qu'on va se sauver de la récession. Sinon, on verra éventuellement. Il a un avantage, c'est une marge de manœuvre significative en cas de pépin, mais il ne met pas en place les mesures préventives qui permettraient à l'économie du Canada et du Québec d'être prêts en cas de récession. En ceci, c'est un budget à courte vue qui ne demande pas énormément de temps de planification, tellement c'est mince. Moi, j'ai connu les budgets à l'Assemblée nationale du Québec où les pupitres plient carrément sous le poids des documents qu'on nous donne. Là, il y a peu de documents, puis ils se répètent.
Will the Bloc support the budget, please, sir?
No.
Why not?
Because we said that we would not support a budget that would not acknowledge the fact that the provinces in Quebec need 35% of the total budget in health care to support the system and make it minimally good enough for the services it has to provide. With this budget, it is clear that this will not happen. If we take the example of Quebec, about $1 billion a year will not make a difference in a budget that is already of something like $72 or $74 billion a year in health care. So it is not significant, and it is not enough, and it will not justify our support.
What do you think of the huge chunk of funding that's going toward dental care? Was it more than you expected to see?
This is about what we expected to see. The big difference is that they are creating a centralized agency to manage this program. We will see what will happen with this when time comes and how this will be implemented in Quebec.
Pour les Québécois, c'est quoi la mesure, selon vous, dans ce budget-là qui est positive puis que c'est un bon coup pour le Québec?
En fait, il y a une mesure minimale qui correspond à quelque chose que nous, mais pas seulement nous, en fait, tout le monde demandait ça, qui est de donner un peu d'argent aux citoyens les plus vulnérables. Donc, le remboursement supplémentaire de TPS qui va prendre la forme d'un chèque est un peu d'oxygène. Mais je pense que ce dont ces gens ont besoin, dans un contexte où, oui, bien sûr, pas la récession, mais l'inflation va ralentir, mais le prix des denrées va rester élevé, ces gens-là avaient besoin d'une mesure durable, d'une mesure pérenne, une augmentation substantielle et durable du pouvoir d'achat des gens les plus vulnérables de la société.
The environment, I just want to ask you, you were saying that a lot of the initiatives you feel are sort of not for really green projects. They're not actually, in your view, the right projects that should be invested on doing health environment. So tell me about
carbon
that.
sequestration, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Capture.
Yeah. Carbon capture and
Carbon
storage.
capture.
But sequestration.
Carbon capture is something that does not work and is provided essentially for the oil companies to keep going in drilling. If we are hiding some support for nuclear power in those initiatives that are intended to help create a more productive electricity network throughout Canada, then it is not a good thing because in the Canadian context, nuclear energy is not green, is not clean. And this idea of what we call in French hydrogen gris, gray hydrogen? You translate it the same way? It is something which is produced with gas. It's all measures which we cannot measure precisely how much will go to this, and it will be implemented through tax credits, so we will never know who will have benefited from it.
Hydro-Québec va pouvoir bénéficier de milliards de dollars pour des travaux pour améliorer ses infrastructures ou encore des nouveaux barrages. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de cette mesure-là en particulier?
C'est une des choses sur lesquelles on s'est le plus gratté la tête parce qu'on en sait beaucoup trop peu. On en sait trop peu pour savoir comment Hydro-Québec va réagir, comment Hydro-Québec va se qualifier, comment les projets d'Hydro-Québec à venir. Vous savez, je ferai une comparaison avec la Bourse du carbone. Quand on a créé la Bourse du carbone entre le Québec et la Californie, bien, au début, le Québec était déjà tellement performant qu'il ne pouvait pas multiplier les projets pour réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre. La Californie était au bon moment et donc le Québec a envoyé beaucoup de capitaux en Californie au début de ça. C'est un peu pareil. Hydro-Québec est tellement déjà un géant de production que les nouveaux projets ne seront peut-être pas aussi nombreux pour le Québec que pour des endroits qui n'attendaient peut-être que ça, en particulier l'industrie nucléaire ontarienne.
Est-ce qu'il devrait y avoir des mesures particulières pour Hydro-Québec pour les féliciter ou bien pour les aider davantage dans leur développement?
En fait, il faut être certain que ce que le fédéral fera, et c'est beaucoup trop préliminaire pour qu'on puisse en faire une analyse précise, ne créera pas une concurrence inadéquate et illégitime à l'encontre d'Hydro-Québec, qui a atteint la dimension qu'on lui connaît et le prestige qu'on lui connaît sans l'aide du fédéral. Pas un sou, rien. Que le fédéral dise maintenant, nous allons contribuer à créer des concurrents à Hydro-Québec. Vous savez que pour nous, au Québec, on fait OK, vous n'étiez pas là à l'époque pour soutenir la création d'Hydro-Québec. Alors pourquoi aujourd'hui est-ce que vous allez soutenir ceux qui veulent occuper des marchés qui sont présentement ou qui devraient dans le futur être ceux d'Hydro-Québec?
The budget also contains a couple of measures on foreign interference, $50 million to help the RCMP investigate and speak with diaspora communities, and then $13 million to create a new counter foreign interference office. Are you pleased to see this in the budget? Is there more that you would have liked to see and what?
A budget is not the place where we can measure and analyze the relevancy of such measures. This is a number. Beside it, there's a word. I want to know the meaning, the way this will work. The amount of money which is supposed to be invested in such an issue is interesting, but rather small. But what, and it's always the same thing, what will be the mandate of any such new institution? The federal government does not use well the institutions already existing, and it does not put in place an inquiry about those intrusion of China into Canadian politics. So I do not see how a word in a budget with a number would make so much of a difference. If you want to know what should be done with that money, first start with an inquiry, independent, with some measures proposed at the end of it.
Donc, on vous a posé la question en anglais, je devrais juste vous l'entendre dire clairement en français. Allez-vous appuyer ce budget?
Nous n'appuierons pas ce budget parce que ce budget-là ne rencontre pas ce que sont nos exigences à nous en matière de transfert en santé. Il faut comprendre que si environ 1 milliard par année va au Québec supplémentaire en santé. C'est 1 milliard sur à peu près 73 ou 74 milliards qui sont déjà investis en santé, peut-être même un peu davantage, de telle sorte que ce n'est pas ça qui va permettre une révolution dans le système de santé québécois ou des provinces. C'est une somme que les provinces ont acceptée parce qu'elles étaient confrontées à un « c'est ça » ou « bedon, c'est rien ». Pour nous, du Bloc québécois, ça reste profondément inacceptable que le gouvernement fédéral, qui vit avec une marge de manœuvre financière aussi importante, continue à retenir des sommes nécessaires en santé. Je trouve que c'est immoral. Et j'irais jusqu'à dire que si les transferts en santé demandés avaient été faits il y a à peu près 2 ans, lorsque ça a été demandé pour les premières fois, on aurait sauvé des vies.
Do you make of the $40 billion deficit? Do you think the government is being fiscally responsible with this budget?
Actually, this $40 million of deficit is compensated by the amount of money which was budgeted last year and was not spent, which is quite precisely $38 billion, if I remember well. So the government is basically flat this year, and it does manage to preserve a margin for maneuver to spend money if it does require to do so. And if this money is not spent, what a nice treasure for next year's possible budget and maybe after elections.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Aujourd'hui, la coalition coûteuse des libéraux et néo-démocrates ont attaqué les chèques de paie et les pensions des Canadiens, avec des dépenses qui équivaut à peu près 4 200 $ pour chaque famille canadienne. C'est des hausses de taxes, des hausses d'impôts et des hausses d'inflation. Le Parti conservateur a demandé 3 choses: que le gouvernement mette en place des réductions de coûts pour éliminer l'inflation, les réductions de taxes pour que les Canadiens puissent ramener davantage chez eux, et troisièmement, d'éliminer la paperasserie pour bâtir davantage de maisons et rendre le logement plus abordable. Les libéraux n'ont rien fait pour ces demandes-là. Ça n'a pas de bon sens. Ça n'a pas de bon sens. Les Canadiens ne peuvent plus payer la facture pour cette coalition coûteuse qui augmente les taxes, les impôts et l'inflation. Et c'est pour ça que le Parti conservateur votera contre ce budget inflationniste. Thank you very much for being here today. Today's budget by the costly coalition of the NDP and Liberals is a full frontal attack on the paychecks of hardworking Canadians. It equals $4,200 per family in new government spending. That's more inflation, more taxes, and more costs for everyday people. There's no common sense. We asked for 3 things. The government should have brought home lower prices by eliminating inflationary deficits and carbon taxes, brought home powerful paychecks with lower taxes that reward hard work, and brought homes people could afford by getting rid of the government gatekeepers to speed up and lower the cost of building permits. Those are the 3 demands we put forward, and those 3 demands have not been met. This is an attack on the hardworking people of this country, and that is why Conservatives will be voting no. Instead, we will vote to bring home powerful paychecks, bring home lower costs, and bring homes that people can afford. It's common sense. Let's bring it home.
A big chunk of the money goes toward, obviously, dental coverage. This is not something that the government ran on as a mandate. What do you make of this, that, you know, a huge amount of taxpayers' money is going toward this initiative when they didn't run on this issue?
Well, they didn't run on any of this. They've once again broken their promises, and they've poured fuel on the inflationary fire. Low-income, working-class people will suffer the most as a result of this costly, inflationary, liberal deficit. Conservatives will fight once again to bring home lower prices by eliminating the inflationary carbon tax and deficits, bring home powerful paychecks by lowering taxes to reward hard work and bring homes people can afford by getting the gatekeepers out of the way to build millions of new residents affordable for our workers.
Sur la taxe sur le carbone, on sait que le gouvernement fédéral veut maintenant lier les mains des prochains gouvernements pour vous empêcher...
Impossible. Justin Trudeau veut forcer les contribuables de payer des grands montants, des milliards de dollars aux grandes entreprises multinationales si jamais un gouvernement futur réduit le coût de l'essence. Vraiment, c'est impossible. Un gouvernement Poilievre va réduire le coût de l'essence, de chauffage et de tout autre produit, et on ne va jamais payer des pénalités aux grandes entreprises qui sont des petites amies de Justin Trudeau.
Why is that impossible? Why is that impossible? Why is it impossible for him to compensate companies?
Let's just follow how out of touch Justin Trudeau is. Justin Trudeau believes Canadian taxpayers should make multi-billion-dollar payments to powerful multinational corporations if ever a future government should reduce taxes on gas and home heating. That's what he believes. He believes the little old lady who can't heat her home and pay for her food should have to pay higher taxes to fund a multinational corporation if in any event, in any future scenario, we should lower taxes on energy. That is an outrageous attack on our working class. Another example of Justin Trudeau taking from the have-nots to give to the have-yachts.
How much of this do you think is related to the NDP deal that they have, and what do you think of the NDP saying, we're supporting this because we've gotten what we need out of it?
We have an NDP government that is running massive inflationary deficits, bankrupting households, keeping young people living in their parents' basements, forcing seniors to choose between heating and eating. There is literally only one party that is championing the hardworking people who contribute and make this country work. We, as Conservatives, will fight for a Canada that works for the people who work. It's common sense. We need to bring it home.
Le retour à l'équilibre budgétaire devrait se faire quand et de quelle manière?
Pardon?
Le retour à l'équilibre budgétaire devrait se faire quand et de quelle manière?
Mais tout d'abord, en arrêtant d'ajouter davantage de dettes. Aujourd'hui, le gouvernement a annoncé une autre 67 milliards de dollars de dépenses supplémentaires qu'on n'avait pas auparavant. Des mesures coûteuses. Il faut arrêter d'ajouter. Il faut mettre un cap, il faut limiter les dépenses avec une loi qui oblige le gouvernement de trouver $1 d'économie pour chaque dollar de nouveaux dépenses. Il faut éliminer le gaspillage, arrêter de donner nos sommes aux consultants et d'éliminer le gaspillage dans le gouvernement. C'est comme ça qu'un gouvernement Poilievre va éliminer les déficits inflationnistes et laisser davantage dans les poches des Canadiens pour que le travail redevienne payant encore.
On foreign interference, there are a pair of measures in the budget to try and deal with this. More money for the RCMP to investigate and liaise with diaspora communities, and the creation of a new counter-foreign interference office. Is that enough in your eyes? Would you like to see more? And specifically, what more would you like to see in the budget on that?
Well, it's not just more money. We need a Prime Minister who protects our democracy. This Prime Minister was aware that the dictatorship in Beijing was interfering in multiple elections to help him get elected, and he did exactly nothing. What we need is a Prime Minister who will bring home control of our democracy to this country. This country should control its own democracy, not Davos, not Beijing. No one outside of the walls of our country should determine what happens in our land, and I will stand up for our democracy.
I'm wondering if there's anything in this budget that you support, that you think will move Canada forward and will help Canadians when it comes to affordability?
No, there's nothing that will help with affordability. Everything in this budget will make it more expensive to eat, heat, and house yourself. But there is some positive proposals for First Nations that I'm glad that the government is plagiarizing, and I use the term favorably. My proposal to give First Nations more control over their money, their land, and their decision-making. There's a whole section on that I think is very encouraging, and we want to build upon that. So, thank you.
For workers that are tied into these tax credits?
Well, the Prime Minister wants to tax people's paychecks more. That's an attack on workers, not a benefit to workers. So we believe in lower taxes that reward hard work. There's a war on work in this country. Right now, you can lose as much as 89 cents for every extra dollar you earn. Losses that come through clawbacks and taxes. When you punish work, you get less work. A Poilievre government will reform taxes and clawbacks so that people bring home more of each dollar they earn, and hard work pays off. Thank you very much.